This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Tracy Pleschourt. And I want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. And I want to let people know that we are also a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You see the icon up there that says listen on Newsly. So if you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free premium subscription to listen on that podcast channel where we are a featured podcast. And we'll be on Newsly later tonight. But I want to let all people also know that we're at episode 993 of the Fam Electric Ghost podcast, tracking that on Apple Podcast. And also, for those of you who are just listening, we have a URL of www.self.madeyou.com, and that will be fully clickable when we're published. Hello?
Oh. Are you talking to me, Phantom? Oh, yes. Hi. Sorry. Thank you for having me. It is so good to be here.
We also, what we want to talk about today is we have your topic for discussion is how the self-made you is fulfilling the disastrous gap that our formal education system creates for our students. So, given your background as a solutions coach, maybe you want to talk about when you were in advertising as well. Maybe, I don't know where you want to start with your background, tell your story to the audience.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoy, being exposed to new audiences. I have audiences that are coming to me looking to solve their problems because I'm a certified life coach. And I also get an abundance of people who are wanting to achieve goals and really looking for a better way of doing that. And so the way that I like to, really teach them is a little bit unconventional. So many of us are looking outside of ourselves for the solution. And I know that I spent majority of my life trying to find a solution to losing weight, to stop overeating, stop overdrinking. I was always looking for that silver bullet. And it had me looking outside of myself. It never had me going within and trying to become the solution to my problems. I thought I was the common denominator to all of my problems. And so I created the self-operating system, and I use the framework of SELF as a way of remembering which step to take and in which order. And that stands for start with a decision, eliminate the self-sabotage, leverage your strengths, and finish with a decision. Those are the 4 steps to really thinking different about yourself, thinking differently about your problems, thinking differently about your goals. And I created a school called Self-Made You that teaches you how to leverage yourself, how to think of yourself as the solution and actually get sustainable results. And again, this is only from years of trying the opposite, looking outside of myself, looking for the silver bullets, spending a lot of money on, solutions that actually, if they worked, they didn't work long term. And so this is a very unconventional way of going about solving problems, achieving goals that, creates a sense of self-reliance, creates a sense of confidence. And I like to tell clients or anybody who's willing to listen that if you've struggled with achieving your goals, overcoming obstacles, it's not because you're broken. It's simply because you've never been taught how to think. We all have had our experience with some sort of formal education that taught us what to think. And then we were tested on our ability to memorize what it is that we learned. But we were never taught like the neuroscience of our brain and how to actually use our brain in a way that gets us the results that we want. So I've dedicated my entire career to teaching people how to think. And so, like I said, we have this very simple framework that we teach from that gets long-lasting results and has unlimited applications.
That's interesting. It's somewhat like the Socratic method, because I went to a college called Bowdoin College. And what we did at the end of the term is we didn't have multiple choice. We had a blue book, and we had to put in our own words the concepts that we learned. And it wasn't about just rote memorization. It was about being able to apply what we learned in the term from our own experience and see if we could put it into real life.
Yeah.
So,
I think applied learning is, I think, one of the best ways of learning, taking, a concept and applying it to something significant, something that you are actually experiencing so that you can learn it at a deeper level. I also think that recall and reflecting is probably second to applied learning. So once you have had an experience, recalling or reflecting back on what it is that you learned and what the significance or the outcome was is another way of creating a sustainable learning experience. I just don't think that most of us have had that kind of a learning experience. And so that's what we bring forward. We typically use something that is as universal and as abundant as a day. We all have a day. We have an abundance of days. And so I use today as the application to teach my methodology of utilizing yourself to, navigate towards what it is that you want. And so, like I said, we start with a decision. What is it that you want today? What is the narrative that you're hearing that just through simple neuroscience, through well-driven neural pathways that, comes to mind just like that? It's that narrative that says, this isn't fair, or this is going to be hard, or you should have done this differently. Like, those are the narratives that so many of us hear and we don't even realize it. And we tend to react from those narratives. But those narratives are coming from a part of our brain that is meant to keep us alive. And it does it in a very dramatic way. It offers us thoughts that are almost never even true, but we don't question those thoughts. So we teach people how to recognize those narratives that you're listening to and question them. And we teach them, why they're even happening. It's not in an attempt to villainize that part of your brain. It actually has a purpose. It's meant to keep you alive. But if you're not in any danger, you really don't need to be listening to those narratives from that part of your brain. So we teach you to operate from the other side of your brain. And that's the part of your brain that's more extraordinary. It has the ability to respond instead of react. It has the ability to actually kind of be the watcher of your thoughts. Slow down and really question your thinking so that you can reasonably say, oh, I've been listening to this narrative that's not even true. That's what's actually making me feel this way. So really shining a light on these beliefs that are often so deep you don't even realize you have them, but yet you live your life for the most part from them. And so we spend a lot of time really shining a light, really better understanding ourselves so that we can think and feel and behave differently, than in the next 10 minutes, the next day, next month, and so on, because it's the compounded effect that actually creates our life. And so if you have kind of that GPS of what it is that you want to be driving towards, and you start asking yourself very specific questions around what it is that you want, you will quickly see how easy it is to fall prey to those saboteur narratives. They're there. They're very prominent in our life. So we need to kind of become even more familiar with them so that we can fight them. You can't fight the enemy you can't see. So we want to really shine a light on them, be aware of them, and not beat ourselves up over having them, just be aware so that we can respond instead of reacting.
So I guess I work with a lot of creative people, like writers, artists, musicians, and we kind of live in the idea of the flow state or stream of consciousness.
Uh-huh.
And so when I create, I like to go into that flow state and trust myself. And what I find a lot of people, the enemy of some creativity or creative project can be perfection. And I'm a big fan of the happy accident. So what happens is, like, if you're writing and you go into a flow state, yeah, you might have had an idea, you might have had a plan, but you're not using that logic brain to say, well, that's not good, or I start all over again. You kind of finish a complete thought. You allow yourself to explore, and it gets rid of some of the limiting beliefs. Because if you have a limiting belief, you say, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not able to do this, then you won't even try it. But if you are willing to be in a flow state or be stream of consciousness, to kind of go ad lib, that can start the process. And a lot of people don't even start because they feel like it's got to be 100%. Got to go from 0 to 100, and sometimes it's very incremental.
Yeah, so that is such a great way of explaining the two parts of your brain. So I'll explain it in a little bit more of a scientific way. If you think of your brain, that 3-pound organ that exists between your ears, if you were to cut it straight down the middle, the left side is your primitive brain. It is meant to keep you alive. So it keeps your heart beating without having to think about it. It keeps you breathing without having to think about it. It actually keeps you from walking in front of a bus. It is actually the more habitual, very efficient part of your brain. So it has a purpose, but it also still thinks that you're in a primitive state. And so it thinks that there is danger lurking around every corner. And so it often is very dramatic. So for example, if I'm on a diet and I walk through my kitchen and I see a plate of cookies, my primitive brain tells me, you better eat those before they're not there, before somebody else eats them, right? It thinks that I'm in danger of not being able to eat the cookies. And that's not true. There's really no danger, but it's so dramatic. And that neural pathway is so well established that I don't even question that. The next thing I know, I've not only eaten one, but I've probably eaten the whole plate because it's very habitual. I see it, I have the urge, and I eat it. So that's what it looks like to actually fall prey to your primitive brain and not understand that it's just being dramatic. It's trying to keep you alive, but you're not in any danger. So that's how things start to unfold. And when you have the compounded effect of that day after day after day, it typically leads to net negative results, or results that you don't want to have in your life. So understanding where those negative or saboteur narratives are coming from really helps you in understanding yourself. So your primitive brain has 10 saboteur narratives. The most universal is the judge, where we're either judging ourselves, or we're judging other people, or we're judging circumstances. So judging circumstances sounds like, once I earn 6 figures, then I'll be successful. Once I lose the weight, then I'll be happy. Once I find Mr. Right, then I'll feel loved, right? It's if, when, then I'll get to feel something. It's you're reserving your happiness, or whatever it is that you're striving for, you're reserving that for the finish line, when in reality all of those feelings are available to you right now. But because of that judgment, you're judging a circumstance, you keep yourself from ever experiencing that. So the judge really has you feeling guilt, regret, shame, disappointment. It's very common. It's very universal. I would say second to the judge is probably the hyperachiever, where you feel very unworthy, you feel very vulnerable, and you're dependent on constant performance and achievement for self-respect and self-validation. you are striving for external validation and attention and acceptance from others, it really leads to a lot of unsustainable kind of workaholic tendencies. So the thoughts that you often have is, I have to be the best at this. If I don't succeed, I'm a failure. I can't be satisfied until this is perfect, or there's always room for improvement. That hyperachiever narrative is so common, and it has us either quitting before we finish or often never even starting. Another universal one is the people pleaser, where we feel selfish or we feel worried or we feel resentful. And you're thinking that if you are expressing your true opinions, it's going to jeopardize the acceptance or affection from other people. You often think that you need to rescue or solve other people's problems in order for them to need you or appreciate you. You are indirectly trying to gain acceptance and affection by helping or pleasing or rescuing or flattering other people, and you lose sight of your own needs and you become resentful as a result. So there's 10 of these saboteur narratives, and it's really helpful to know which ones your life is being lived from. And there's no shame in having them. It's just good to know so that you stop reacting to them, that you kind of intercept. When you hear it, you just go, oh yeah, that's a function of my primitive brain. I'm not in any danger. I don't need to listen to that. I don't need to react from it. Instead, I'm going to respond. So if you're following our 4-step system and you're really relying on yourself, again, it's starting with a decision. What is it that I want? Always ask yourself, what is it that I want? So that you remain in the driver's seat. You, the person that often feels out of control, gains control simply by asking yourself and answering that question. And then secondly, eliminating the self-sabotage. You will not react to that saboteur narrative if you're expecting it. If you are on the lookout for it, you're not going to react. You're going to respond instead. So you start with a decision about what it is that you want. You eliminate the self-sabotage by expecting those narratives to be there. And then you leverage your strengths. So now you're going to operate from the other part of your brain. We talked about the primitive part of your brain, but the prodigy part of your brain is the other side. It's the more extraordinary part of your brain. It's the part of your brain that can respond instead of react. Now, this part of your brain gives you access to strengths like compassion, like creativity, innovation, discovery. This is the part of your brain that you can activate with clear, concise, confident actions. This is the part of your brain you can tap into your truest essence and your future self. This is the part of your brain where you feel in flow. So this is the more creative part. A lot of my creative clients can talk very vividly. They can articulate what it's like to be in that, operating from that part of their brain. And they definitely can articulate what the suffering feels like when they're not operating from that part of their brain, when they're listening unintentionally to those saboteur narratives. So when you know you're operating from your prodigy brain, now I want you to maximize it. I want you to leverage that. And so again, empathy, compassion, creativity, innovation is all available to you. So we give you the questions to ask yourself when you know that you've cracked the door open to your prodigy brain, so you can really maximize when you're there. And then finally, that 4th step is finish with a decision. So you've started with the decision, asking yourself what you wanted. You eliminate the self-sabotage by understanding which narratives you're most likely to listen to. You leverage your prodigy brain strengths once you find yourself there and operating from that part of your brain. And finally, you finish with the decision. What's the next best step? What's the one next step that I can take that is so easy, it's almost hard not to do? So we're not talking about the whole, roadmap. We don't need to know what every step is going to look like until we get to where it is that we want to be. We want to be on this journey just confidently taking one step after the next, knowing that you're operating from your prodigy brain. You're staying very open and abundant to whatever life has in store for you. So it's not this fixed mindset of I need to know what the journey is going to look like. I need to have the entire path unfolded for me. No, it's just what's the next best step, and feeling very confident about taking that one next step, deciding what it's going to be. And if I had to make a decision, what would be so easy that it's almost hard not to do? I love that question. So those are the 4 steps. The acronym is SELF, so it's not hard to remember. You always take yourself with you wherever you're going, no matter what the decision is, whatever the occasion is. It has unlimited applications.
But I guess sometimes if you think about like what people want, if somebody says they want $1 million, I would argue that that's probably not really what they want. They probably want something that they think they're going to get when they get the $1 million. So exactly then right. Do you have to like uncover, like, do you want freedom of to be able to actually exercise creativity or be able to start a small business? It's not actually the $1 million that you want. You want the independence, or you want the capability to be the master of your own fate. And so you have to kind of uncover, like, maybe beyond the first initial statement of what they want. Is exactly that really right. What they want?
Yep. Yeah. The primitive brain responses are usually very surface level. And so learning to ask yourself questions, learning to think, requires you to go deeper. And so the first question I gave you in each one of the steps is just that. It's the first question, but there are questions that go deeper. So the second question after what it is that you want is, why do you want it? And that reveals so much more. Often what it is that you want is an emotion. It's usually happiness. It's usually to feel worthy, to feel needed, right? And so that's really good to know. That's really good to discover. And so asking those kind of questions helps you better understand yourself. It requires you to be operating from your prodigy brain just in order to answer the question. And now my job as a coach is to really show you how your thinking is actually unfolding into the experiences that you are having and how much control you actually have. But you have to be intentional. You have to be intentional about the way you think and feel. So your feelings come from the thoughts that you're either unintentionally or intentionally thinking. So we teach you how to think so that you feel the way you want to feel. And it's always, your behaviors are always driven by your feelings. So if you're feeling defeated, your behaviors are going to reflect that. If you're feeling curious, or if you're feeling happy, or if you're feeling motivated, your behaviors are going to reflect that. So your feelings end up being one of the linchpins, but you have to kind of back it up, reverse architect, and say, okay, well, what creates my feelings? If I want to be feeling motivated, what would I have to be believing to feel that way? So there is a sequence of events. There's a hierarchy that you have to understand, in that kind of, parallels to the neuroscience that we teach. So it has everything to do with understanding yourself. If you're somebody who has felt broken for many, many years, it's only because you haven't been taught how to think, and you have jumped to a conclusion that you are broken without even validating that. And so we want to kind of back that train up and teach you how to think so that you can question that line of thinking. And if you choose to keep that line of thinking, that's your prerogative. We're not here to decide what's right and wrong for you. We just want to help you understand how your thinking is yielding the experiences that you're having?
Well, in my background, I'm a Buddhist, and I think of I feel like the law of cause and effect, and
Mm-hmm.
also this meditation and breathing exercise, and being able to take the calm in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times in terms of creativity, it's not all planning. Sometimes you have to have a moment of peace and quiet and silence
Mm-hmm.
where you're not overthinking with all the noise
Right.
to get to
Right.
a point where you can actually be creative, right?
Right.
So being a creative person, I constantly write music, constantly put out creative exercises, and it's not like I do it because I'm planning it. It's been integrated into my life as
Mm-hmm.
a catharsis
Yes.
to kind of use art therapy to work out my issues through art. So if I'm happy, I might write happy music or write poetry, or if I'm sad or melancholy, I still do some type of creative exercise. But I
Mm-hmm.
also give myself time to go walk in the woods because, like, the cathedral is nature, right?
Right.
So I get my time to meditate and do breathing exercises and different things. So sometimes it's a matter of understanding like the process, but also giving yourself some time to kind of not be driven by all these like the wolves in the world, like it's like the
Right.
saber-toothed tigers in the world, because now you can get triggered not by a actual saber-tooth or a wolf, but by somebody saying something that makes
Exactly.
you trigger like an adrenal response, like you were running away from a saber-tooth, like you're running away from a wolf. So how do you handle like have a strategy to not get triggered into these adrenal responses that may put you in that fear or flight or
Yeah.
fight mode?
Right. So, we all have a nervous system that is going to have some sort of reaction or response. And so there's triggers. And first off, knowing yourself, understanding, having compassion for yourself, that there may be trauma in your past that, creates triggers for you. And so having the compassion and the understanding and being aware of that is incredibly helpful. But also understanding that when you're operating from that prodigy part of your brain and you are at this more heightened level of awareness where you have more presence about you, that's when you can tap into things like certain mental fitness techniques, any deep breathing, box breathing. You said, writing music can be a mental fitness technique for you. Meditation. There are hundreds of mental fitness techniques. Finding what works for you is, and discovering that is going to be the effect of your primitive brain in kind of a discovery mode. So once you are in or operating from your prodigy brain, you can start to discover, okay, what kind of environments do I work best in? What if I am triggered? That doesn't mean that the trigger has to end in some sort of net negative. You can have an awareness of that trigger and still not react. You can still respond to it. Mental fitness techniques of any kind are so helpful to ground you, to kind of give you, there's the cause and then there's, or the stimulus, and then there's the response, but there's a period in between that you have a choice. But again, you have to not be with this runaway train, reactive brain. And in fear mode, you have to have the wherewithal to know the neuroscience of your brain and just understand that it's very normal to have these reactive responses, but it doesn't have to unfold into net negative consequences. You can actually intercept it.
How do you deal with like the kind of situation of procrastination in people's lives where they're kind of in a paralysis of not making that decision, right?
Yeah.
So because there's a lot of people, like I've talked to podcasters or people who want to be podcasters, and
Mhm.
they said, look, I'm going to do one, and well, they've 5 years and they still never did episode one
Right.
because they wanted everything to be like from 0 to 100 on episode one.
Yeah.
You know,
So
and
procrastination is the
yeah,
effect
how
of,
do you do that?
yeah. So what's the cause of that effect, of that result? So the result is procrastination, never getting started, never following through on maybe a commitment. What's the cause? The cause is the fear-based narrative that they are unintentionally listening to. It happens all day, every day. So another one is kind of this restless narrative where it makes us very impatient, or it makes us almost having like living with the fear of missing out. It keeps you very worried. You're in search of kind of greater excitement into the next activity, or it keeps you in constant busyness. You're rarely at peace or content with the current activity. It's almost like restlessness is this strategy to escape from dealing with fears and anxiety or painful feelings. So it often has you in kind of a procrastination mode. You have a commitment, but you're afraid of failing. And so you distract yourself with something else. And that results in procrastination. Like the hyperachiever narrative that I mentioned earlier, that has you like afraid of even starting, because you think, okay, well, I don't know exactly how to do this, and I'm afraid of doing something that's not going to be perfect in fear of what other people might think of me. And so you just don't start. So what's the antidote? Is understanding what is it that you're afraid of, and really digging into that, because what you'll quickly find out is what you're afraid of is an emotion. You're afraid of feeling something. And when you realize that an emotion is something that we are meant to feel, the entire spectrum, we're meant to feel it all, and we're capable of feeling it all of a sudden shining a light on that emotion, recognizing that that's not going to kill you. The fear of failing or humiliation or embarrassment, you're very capable of feeling that. You don't have to run away from that. And actually, to the contrary, if you actually lean into it and you're willing to feel those emotions, you prove to yourself that you have the capacity to feel that. There's nothing to be afraid of. And now productivity actually starts. But without actually shining a light on it and asking yourself, what am I afraid of? Is it a fear of failing? Is it the fear of making somebody else unhappy? Am I listening to the avoider narrative, where I'm thinking it's too much, or if it can't be done perfectly, I'm not going to even begin to start? It's where you tend to focus on positive and pleasant in an extreme way. So you avoid all difficult and unpleasant tasks or conflicts. You're kind of that person that inherently you are somebody who is kind of a peacemaker. You're somebody who is very flexible and adaptable, but unfortunately those qualities have started to be overused and abused, and they show up in this kind of avoider sort of way. So all of these narratives that you're listening to are actually steeped in your inherent strengths, and that's really good to know. Unfortunately, those strengths can be overused and abused and create net negative consequences. So that people pleaser, your inherent strengths are being a very empathetic, a very loving person. You're tuned into other people's feelings and needs. You have a high emotional intelligence. But when all of that is overused and abused, it comes out as a people pleaser, and you start to get net negative results. So you have to have that awareness so you can be on the lookout for it. Does that answer your question? Long-winded answers, I know.
Well, I think some people have a problem with being authentic and being like on the bleeding edge, because they'd rather not be in that kind of a situation where you go with what's popular.
Mhm.
And instead of, if like anytime somebody's an innovator, they step into a situation where there's all these haters. There's always people who say, well, that's not good. A good example just in music is like Bob Dylan went electric, went to the folk festival. People said that's not real music. Miles Davis switched from bebop to fusion. That's not jazz anymore. So when you do that, you will get a reaction. The innovators are usually able to kind of handle the fact that not everybody's going to love it. In fact, the critic might say that you've lost it. You have to kind of have and some people don't feel they have a right to do that. They feel like, well, I don't have the right to push the envelope. I need to be the peacemaker. I need to make everybody happy. So but only the problem is, like you said, then you're not happy. Exactly. So if you're not happy, how are you ever going to really self-actualize if you're just doing stuff for everybody else?
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's just, self-actualization is at the very tippy top. And so if those basic needs down below that aren't being met, it's very difficult to get up to self-actualization. So your basic needs, like your basic security needs of trust, have to be met. And if you don't trust yourself, if you don't trust your own opinion, it's very difficult to be able to get into like self-actualization or fulfilling your truest purpose. You have to go within. This is all about reflecting back on yourself. So if you're questioning whether somebody is going to love your music, you have to go back within and ask yourself, do you love it? Do you trust yourself to make your opinion the only one that matters, right? Like innovators are creators, and you have to understand your own thinking because it's thoughts that create things. And so it does get deep, but in a way to simplify it, I want people just to remember it has everything to do with yourself. It has nothing to do with anything outside of yourself. So always ask yourself your opinion. You get to decide. Nobody can make these decisions for you, even though you were exposed to messaging all the way up until today that says otherwise, that says this is the way you should be thinking, feeling, and behaving. That's not true. You get to decide what works for you, what you want from your life, what matters to you. You can absolutely be, navigating day by day through your values. You do not have to buy into other people's opinions. You get to decide. Deciding is what creates that sense of self-control. So if you're somebody that feels hopelessly out of control, make a decision. Just make one tiny little decision. It will get you back on the path of feeling in control. It's a great place to start. That's why our step number one is start with a decision.
It seems like there's a lot of reprogramming. Like if you've come up in a microcosm within your family, and it was very top down, and it was very hierarchical, and let's say like women aren't allowed to do this, right? And it's that way for like the last 100, 200 years, and you try to push outside of that, you feel guilty. But if you push outside of that, you feel shame if you push outside of that. And so sometimes I got to study sociology, and the sociology on the microcosm affects, the macrocosm goes in the microcosm, they go both ways.
Right.
So like if you have this macrocosm societal structure that says this person has to stay within this lane. And if you go outside that lane, you actually get dinged for it. You get pain for it. They don't make it easy. And so it is something that you can control, but you have to push yourself to that leading edge, or maybe you have to remove yourself from that environment, or not be affected by the consequences of what those mores set up.
Right. And honestly, Phantom, the antidote to that, to pushing outside of those boundaries, or anything that you maybe have been indoctrinated into, it's asking questions. That's all it is. It's asking questions. Is that true? Why is that a problem? Could they be wrong? How can I let them be wrong? Right? Like asking yourself those kinds of questions is the antidote to, being raised in a patriarchal society or culture where you have been taught, do not ask questions, you do as you are told. Well, today, if you've made the decision that you want to think differently, you want to get new results, it starts with asking new questions. Why is that a problem? What else could be true? Could they be wrong? How can I allow them to be wrong? Maybe I was wrong in believing that in the first place. Those are all great questions to start with.
Yeah, you have to challenge your programming.
Exactly.
And you have to realize, your mind's is a computer, is the most powerful computer in the world, more powerful than any computer.
Yep.
And you can actually change the programming. You can actually redirect, the resources and change your mindset and change your paradigms and change those rules.
Yeah. And I think reprogramming can sound a little intimidating. I want to suggest that, it may be necessary to go backwards and kind of unwind some things. Oftentimes therapy can be very helpful in that regard, but you also can just kind of excuse all of those old beliefs because you were never taught how to question those. But starting today and moving forward, you're going to start questioning it. So don't, fool yourself into thinking that reprogramming has to be super complicated and is going to take a long time. It doesn't have to take much time at all. If you just make the decision today, moving forward, I'm going to start questioning my thoughts. And how?
You start from a point, like when you be in the present. That's like one of the things that we're kind of taught, as creative people, especially musicians, is the kind of, how do you play off of a mistake, right? And there's a lot of famous musicians that, well, there's no bad note. Like there's a happy accident. There's an opportunity. Herbie Hancock talked about playing with Miles Davis, and he hit the wrong chord. And he thought it was all over. He's going to get kicked out. And Miles actually changed the song to fit the chord that Herbie did. Yeah. And then he said, well, you know what? I started to think, well, you know what? I'm thinking too heavy about this being perfect. I should live in the moment. I should live in the present and be able to be agile and have fun and not be brought into it. It's like this, playing this music is my life's work and something that makes me happy. Why should I go and make myself feel bad when I'm doing something I love?
Amen.
And so when you can change that mindset, in that moment, then then from that moment forward, you can say, wow, now I'm not stressed out.
Right. I think it's helpful to think of it like in my little peanut brain. It's helpful for me to think about it. Am I operating from my primitive brain or am I operating from my prodigy brain? It's one or the other, right? And so if I'm in a very kind of fixed mindset, that's my primitive brain. If I'm thinking in kind of abundant terms, if I hit the wrong chord and I start thinking, how can this be a gift and an opportunity? I'm operating from my prodigy brain right there. If you are, feeling creative, open, abundant, if you're feeling the possibilities, opportunities, now you're operating from the part of your brain that, like, there are no limits. The sky is the limit. All the ideas that you are receiving are going to turn into things if you decide to turn them into things. So it's so easy if you just slow down and ask yourself, which part of my brain am I operating from? So instead of thinking I have to reframe my thinking or I have to change my mindset, I think sometimes that seems so complicated and it seems like a daunting path. Instead, just know I'm either operating from my primitive brain, which, oh, by the way, happens to be the strongest part of my brain because it's been the well-used muscle, right? Just like if you were in a gym, if you're constantly, using the same dumbbell, lifting, the heavy weight with using your forearm or your, my husband would be like, really? You don't even know the muscles in your arm? Your bicep, right? Of course that bicep is going to get bigger, because
Yeah.
that's the muscle that you keep using. It's the same is true for your prodigy brain. It's called your prefrontal cortex. Your prodigy brain is your prefrontal cortex. If you continue to use that over and over and over, strengthening it, that will become the default muscle. But unfortunately, most people didn't even know it existed. So that's not the part of your brain that's stronger. The primitive brain is stronger. It's so much easier to run on default, to just kind of let things unfold and just, talk about spontaneity and the beautiful, life that being spontaneous affords to you. Well, if that's what you want to believe, that's fine. But typically running on autopilot doesn't usually get you the results that you want. And so you have to be more intentional. And that takes effort. So we wanted to simplify that. And that's why we have our planner that we teach people how to use, that keeps you operating from your prodigy brain, like hour by hour. And the compounded effects of every single day operating hour by hour from your prodigy brain yields amazing, extraordinary results. So, like I said, we use the SELF acronym, the way of operating, staying in your prodigy brain. We use your day, something as abundant and as simple and as universal as a day. And so we created a planner that practices how to stay operating from your prodigy brain hour by hour by hour. It keeps you tapped into your future self, keeps you very connected to your future self, knowing what it is that you want, and really kind of shining a light on a path that your future self is guiding. And it disconnects you from your past self, which is the default mechanism. We all are influenced by our past. We make decisions from the present because we are tethered to our past. And I teach people how to connect to their future self and let their future self pull you towards what it is that you really want. And it yields extraordinary results.
That's interesting. I mean, it's a mindset because like I'm a software developer, and we used to use a methodology called waterfall, where we had to know everything. And we had to put everything into this one document. It's got to be perfect. And then what we live in the world today is the agile development strategy. And with an agile, it's iterative. And what we don't know isn't the end of the world, because we continually do development. And this is kind of marked by, if you go onto your cell phone, you keep on seeing these updates to these apps. Well, these apps are never done. They continually update because we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And we don't think it, we continually fix it, and we say it's okay that we didn't know that. We can actually go forward. We don't beat ourselves up. We just continue to make evolutionary movements.
Exactly.
In terms of, and we're never really done.
Yeah.
It's never really done. It keeps on going, and it never stops. And that's why I think some people think like, well, I gotta know the total end. Is like, maybe it's just incremental, what you can handle incrementally every day, rather than trying to do the whole big thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you do 1.1 instead of doing 1 to 100.
Yeah. My business partner is my 23-year-old daughter who just graduated from college, and we have a podcast called Tracy and Gracie Becoming, and it's all about the state of becoming. There is no finish line. So we talk about, from 2 generational perspectives, what it's like to become. And so every week we are becoming something different, and we talk about that. And we just recorded this next week's podcast, and it's becoming our future self, and what that looks like, and how to really connect deeply to who your future self is, 5 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, and really tap into her or him and get the advice from her perspective, so that you stay in this state of becoming, and not be thinking about life as a finish line, but more, as I like to think of it, as kind of this merry-go-round, which to some people would sound very boring. But to me, it sounds very peaceful, and it puts the onus on me on what it is that I want to kind of look outside and see. And there obviously is always a gold ring that I can go and grab off that merry-go-round if I want to. But I like not thinking about life as a race, and instead thinking about it as if I'm on this merry-go-round with all of these amazing opportunities to see things through different perspectives. And so we talk about all things, becoming. And I think it's been really helpful for our audience to hear it through the lens of two different generations.
Well, that's important. That's important to have the different perspectives, because a lot of times we get, a lot of times the past, in the present, what past is present, present is past. You kind of, when you go into the merry-go-round, you kind of can hit all of that, because there's some things that, you don't lose sight of. And it's a lot of stuff that is a framework, like everything I ever heard as a musician in my subconscious is there. And when I go to do something in a stream of consciousness way, in a flow state, somebody comes back to me and say, hey, you actually used a show tune melody. Did you know you did that? I said, no, because it was just there and it just came out. And sometimes it's like accessing these things in this kind of dream state, or allowing yourself to be free enough to do that, that when you can call stuff from your subconscious and you didn't even know you did it, then it feels really good. That like, really, I must be really connecting, right? That if I can actually have that free flow and I didn't fully intend it. And then it's like, wow, makes you feel good when you're actually in tune. Like you have to get in tune with yourself and the universe. And once you're in tune with yourself, then you can get a total alignment.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it just tells me, and I love working with creative people because they can articulate when they are operating from their prodigy brain, and they know quite quickly when they're hitting those roadblocks and they're operating from their primitive brain. But that is the example, or that is the explanation of what's happening. You're just shifting from operating from one part of your brain to the other. Nothing has gone wrong. There's nothing catastrophic here. It's just you have shifted operating from one side to the other. And so when you know that, and you know how to clearly bridge the gap, get back into your prodigy brain, do the mental fitness techniques, tap into yourself, start with a decision, eliminate the self-sabotage, leverage those strengths like discovery, innovation, creativity, empathy, and finish with a decision of what's just the next best step. What's just the next best step that is so easy, it's hard to do. That has you in an intentional state, operating from your prodigy brain. And those compounded steps are what's going to create an extraordinary life. So I love working with creative people because they can get into that prodigy brain quite easily.
Well, you just I've run into people, creative people who are entrepreneurs, and they're just as creative as a musician in terms of they take this idea, they find the right people, they push for it because they believe in it. They got a dream. They got this service, this product, whatever. I think I got an advantage. I need to find the people that have the vision, and their creative capability is to bring that whole thing together and bring the people and make them believe in it. So they believe in it, and then they bring a tribe of people around them that believe in it, and then they make it happen, and they put it out on the marketplace. And I've worked in startups, and where that kind of mindset very much to me is similar to when I'm playing in a band and we're writing a song. It's like the same dynamic. To me. It felt like the same way. And so that's why I kind of get drawn into being around people. It's kind of like the law of attraction. Like you get pulled into people who are being positive in that way. People who have a vision and then act on the vision, and they see that they're actually successful in doing it. Sometimes you make mistakes. Like a lot of times when we're in these startup type of situations, there's a lot of things that there are steps on the rung, and we don't try to focus on it too much other than lessons learned and move forward.
Right.
and don't, beat each other up because we're trying something we didn't do before. So when you're trying something you didn't do before, you're probably not going to do it perfect,
Right.
but you can keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all energy, right? So that's where the law of attraction comes into play. It is a universal law that, the energy, are we in alignment? And so the primitive brain and the prodigy brain are both contagions. So if you're operating from your primitive brain, the people that you're coming into contact with, they are often going to be, due to law of attraction, they may start operating from their primitive brain, and you have an exchange that you're probably less than happy with. So that's something to always remember, that law of attraction, has everything to do with energy. And, again, which part of your brain are you operating from? It is an energy. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's very true.
Yeah, right. Well, Buddhists, we believe in like cause and effect. So if you have negative thoughts, then you're gonna probably kind of live in negativity. If you have positive mindset, if you say, well, I am going to be happy today, rather than I'm going to be melancholy today, I'm going to be sad in the dumps today. Boy, your body is going to take that message and it's going to go through your whole system, and your mind over matter in your body is very powerful, and the words mean something. So even if you're thinking that you're going to be down in the dumps and you don't feel good, you're actually not going to feel good. Your heart's not going to feel good. Your lungs aren't going to, nothing's going to feel good. But if you sit there and you say, well, you know what? I'm going to have my best day today. And I'm going to meditate about having the most positive day I can have. That has a lot of power. And some people might not believe it. They say, well, I can't touch that. Then, well, you can touch that. But it's a mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It, if they feel like they can't touch that, I would ask them why. Tell me a little bit about that. What are you afraid of? Because that's where the work needs to be done. Right there is to extinguish that fear that they're fighting. And then they are going to be, exposed to a world that's going to blow their mind. And so if you are somebody who just kind of excuses or discounts mindset or law of attraction because you think it's too woo-woo, I would highly recommend asking yourself one really simple question. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And if it's probably a feeling, and maybe it's the unknown. And the antidote to that is continuously asking yourself questions. What are you afraid of? Why is that a problem? What's the worst that could happen? Like, ask yourself those questions. If you just embedded in the state of asking yourself questions, you are by default already operating from your prodigy brain. Now leverage those strengths. What else? What other factors are involved here that I might not be seeing because I was so narrowly focused on running away from the woo-woo, right? Like, what else might there be? What other factors am I not seeing when I'm so focused on I can't, fall prey to the woo-woo? Like, you've got to ask yourself those questions. That is what makes for a much more abundant life. That is what puts all of the control back in your lap. This is how you create a self-made day, a self-made life. It's how you become self-made, is tapping into yourself, taking those 4 steps, starting with a decision, eliminating the self-sabotage, leveraging your strengths, and finishing with a decision. It has unlimited applications, and I would just challenge you to adopt it and to try it. We have free coaching Friday where you can come and bring us any of your hurdles or speed bumps that you might be coming up against. And we also have master classes where we apply this framework to very, very specific circumstances like leadership or professional development or health and wellness or relationships. And it's all free. It's all free. So I would encourage anybody who's listening who wants to try this counterintuitive way to really go within to solve your problems, to think of yourself as the solution and no longer thinking of yourself as the problem. I want to help you.
I want to mention your URL again. It's www.self-madeyou.com. And that is fully clickable when we're published. And I think you talked about like how if you access that, that's how you get into the courses.
Yes.
Maybe you can tell folks what they get there when they go to that URL.
Yes. So when you go to that URL, you can join our community. We have a free community that you gain access to free coaching Friday, to our once a month master classes, to a community of like-minded people. You can get into any of our paid courses or membership, or you can get one-on-one coaching if you want to do that as well. We're there to support you with all of those offers as well. But the free community is very robust, and you can get a lot of traction just with our free resources.
I think it's a good place to start because then you give people like a sample of what they could, and then they can make the decision if they want to go further. And a lot of times, once you make that first step, you take more steps and then you want to get deeper into something. So right. I encourage people, as always, to click on the URLs when we're published. They are clickable, and just support the guests we have on the program. I want to thank you for being on the podcast tonight. It was really great discussion. I learned a lot, and that's the whole point of the show, is to bring people with all these different viewpoints and concepts and ideas into the world, and let people hear it. And so, thank you again. With our mission of doing that, you helped us, and have a great night.
Thanks, Phantom.